Welcome to Make Your Money Matter. I'm your host, Brad Barrett. I'm also a managing director and partner here at One Capital Management. Today on the show, I want to talk about whether or not you should be paying off your debt or investing. Likely it's a question you've asked yourself. Maybe you've spoken with your advisor about it, and we want to address it here on the show because in nearly 2 decades of being a financial advisor, this question definitely is in one of the top 3 that I get asked most frequently. And I want to start off with this. It's important to note that although there are key factors that I'm going to go through here today, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer here. But before we dive in, smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. All right, let's get into it. Okay, it's important when you start asking this question, you should determine really first and foremost what kind of debt you have. Here's why. Not all debts are created equal, my friends, and each debt may have things that are different, right? For example, different interest rates, different payment terms, different flexibility. As an example, let's say credit card debt likely has a higher interest than maybe mortgage or car loan debt. And let's say things like student loans, they may have a higher interest rate than mortgages or car loans, but less likely than credit cards, but they also have different term flexibility than the other two. So understanding those matters. Understanding your debt is really important and will help you make ultimately the informed decision that's right for you. And further to that point, I would share this. There are 2 types of debts that I've spoken about here on the show before that you really need to focus on that really helps with those categories I just mentioned. Good debt and bad debt. And there are 3 classifications that matter for each. For good debt, you want to look at things that are lower interest rates, right? They are for an asset or an investment, so to speak, and typically and hopefully they have some sort of tax benefits to it. Those are the 3 things that matter there on good debt. As an example, mortgage is probably one of the better examples, what many Americans have as debt in their household. So when you look at that, look at the 3 components that I just mentioned. Mortgages, typically relative to unsecured debt, meaning credit cards, have a lower interest rate. They are for an asset, they're an investment in your house, so to speak. And depending on, again, your tax situation, you likely have some Schedule A deductions or write-off ability with the interest that you're paying on that mortgage. So that's a good example of what I would deem as, if you're gonna have debt, good debt. Now, the inverse of that would be bad debt, right? And what classifies bad debt? The inverse of those 3 things. It's higher interest rate, it's debt that's not for an asset or an investment, and likely doesn't have any tax benefits to go along with it. A good example here, obviously, would be credit cards. Now, typically they carry higher interest rates. It's not necessarily for an asset or an investment, so to speak, and likely doesn't have any tax benefits. Now, for my business owners out there, you're likely thinking, okay, that might be different for you, and that may be the case. If you have a business credit card, you might be able to take some benefits there, and maybe the asset you're investing in is a business. But for the most part, that's a good example of unsecured, not so great debt. But again, it still holds back to the first pillar I mentioned, which is higher interest rates. So understanding your debt and classifying your debt matters. Now, shifting to the investment side for a second, when you talk about this, you might be thinking, well, why should I invest in the first place? You know, we talk about it heavily here in our practice at One Capital Management and on our show, because at its core, investing in general is how you will grow your wealth over the long term. Key word there, long term, by investing in things like stocks, bonds, or other asset classes that you might find. And there you can find benefits from things like compound interest, which I spoke about recently on our show. And you can earn higher returns than the interest on your debts. This, my friends, is where we talk about with our clients here, what's called interest rate arbitrage. Sounds kind of fancy, but it's pretty simple. If you can take a house as a great example, and you look at the hypothetical, right, of let's say a mortgage rate at 3 or 4%, and you look historically over real estate, that sector has likely done about 5% over time. So if you're borrowing 3, earning 5, you're making what we call a spread. That's arbitrage. So that's one of the reasons why you want to look at debt and investing in the same equation, because they're a lot of times a married concept to many Americans out there. So the decision really to invest or pay off debt will very likely depend on your unique financial situation. That said, I would usually say if you have high interest rate debt, such as a credit card, it actually might be wise to focus on that debt first and paying that off before investing. But if you have debt with a low interest rate, like again, 3, 4, 5% mortgage, as an example, you might want to look at that in contrast to your investing. You may be better off investing your money for the long term and making that spread. Now, understanding the nature of the 2 together, as I mentioned, for your specific financial situation is really what matters here. But ultimately, it's important to consider your goals, your risk tolerance, and your overall financial situation when making this decision. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, make sure to subscribe to our channel. And until next time, always remember, make your money matter.